morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be when you're watching this. I hope you are doing well and reading lots. I'm going to go ahead and get started reading a new book to you all. It's been a while since I've recorded, and hopefully I'll have some more books coming up soon in the next couple days this week. So today's read is called No Jumping on the Bed, and this is by Arnold. I chose this book because it was on my niece's shelf and it just jumped out at me. I remember reading it when I was a kid, or my parents reading it to me, and so I just thought, let's take a trip down memory lane and read this fun book. So here we go. In his bedroom near the top floor of a tall apartment building, Walter was getting ready for bed. Before turning out the light, his father said, "If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000,000 times. No jumping on the bed. One day it'll crash right through the floor. Now lie down and go to sleep." "Just one more time?" asked Walter. But instead, he plopped down on his pillow and squeezed his eyes closed. "Good night," said his father. He turned off the light and pulled the door almost closed. The room was dark and quiet, except for a soft thump, thump, thump coming from the room above. "That's Delbert upstairs," thought Walter. He switched on his bedside lamp. If Delbert can jump on his bed, so can I. Walter bounced higher and higher. On his last jump, his hair brushed the ceiling, but when he came back down, his mattress cracked, the floor cracked, and the whole bed tipped sideways. Then down through the floor fell Walter, bed and all. Uh-oh. So there it is, tipping over and crack in the floor, and it looks like he is about to go down, down, down. Now, it happened that Walter's bedroom was directly above Miss Hattie's dining room. She was more than a little surprised when a bed fell through her ceiling and Walter landed in her plate of spaghetti and meatballs. "I was not expecting company for dinner," she mumbled with a mouthful of meatballs. So here she is sitting at her table, and then boom, Walter comes through the ceiling. Bed, pillow, teddy bear, right into her spaghetti and meatballs. Said Walter. "Spaghetti is my all-time favorite." But before he could eat, his bed smashed through the table and kept right on crashing down through the floor. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, the plate of spaghetti, the bed, and all. So it looks like everything's going down through the floor now. Uh-oh, I think we have a problem on our hands, readers. Miss Hattie's dining room was above Mr. Maddie's TV room. Mr. Maddie didn't even notice a bed falling through his ceiling until a meatball bounced off his head. Miss Hattie tumbled into his lap, and Walter splashed into his aquarium. "I've already had my bath tonight," said Walter. He wanted to stay and watch the monsters on TV, but his bed crunched through the floor, taking the TV with it. So there's Mr. Maddie and the meatball that knocked him in the head, and then, boom, everybody came crashing through the ceiling. This illustration has so much going on. We've got Walter going into the aquarium, Miss Hattie landing on his lap, his glasses falling off, and everything else coming down with him. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Maddie, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. Walter's Aunt Beatty had just moved into the building. She was still unpacking when Miss Hattie, Mr. Maddie, and a dripping wet Walter tumbled through the ceiling right into a box containing her rare Patagonian stamp collection. So here she is unpacking. I think it might be Miss Batty. I think I said Beatty, but I think Batty is the way it sounds to rhyme with the other names. Hattie, Maddie, Batty. That makes sense, readers. All right, so she's like, what's going on? Look at her expression on her face, the character's facial expression. And then here comes everybody. Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Maddie, the TV, the spaghetti is still there, and the bed. When he burst through the bottom of the box, Walter was a sticky mess. I see you've started collecting stamps, said Aunt Batty as she followed Walter through the new hole in the floor. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Maddie, Aunt Batty, the stamp collection, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. There it all goes, comes crashing down. And one more illustration on this side. There they go. Now, why did all of this start again? Let's take a second to stop and think, because we've got a big problem on our hands. Walter is falling through 3 different people's houses for doing what? He jumped on his bed, didn't he? That's what started all of this. All right, let's see where he ends up next. Patty and Natty had worked 3 days building their dream house with blocks. Afraid that Fatty Cat might knock something over, they carefully shooed her out for the night. Then the upstairs neighbors came through the ceiling. Excuse us, said Walter, remembering his manners. We won't be staying long. Now, readers, why do you think he said we won't be staying long? He came crashing through the ceiling. He ruined their block house. He says, sorry, we won't be staying long. If you said it's because he's just crashing on through, that's correct. He's just gone through everybody's living room, everybody's kitchen, and they just go right on down to the next apartment below them. So that is why he said we won't be staying long, because they just keep on falling down, 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 right? So here is the other illustration. I'm going to finish reading it on this page. The words were barely past his lips when Walter's bed bashed through the floor and continued on its way. So here he goes, and here's Fatty Cat. Looks like Cat, she's going with him now. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Maddie, Aunt Batty, Patty, Natty, Fatty Cat, the stamps, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. The last thing Mr. Hanratty ever expected to see was a bed coming through his studio ceiling, followed by nearly everyone in the building. And he has a studio, and what does it look like he does in the studio? He's a painter. Very good. So he must be an artist, and he has a studio to paint and let his creativity and artistic side come out. If I had known you wanted to see my paintings, he said, I would have tidied up a bit. But they never once paused to admire Mr. Hanratty's colorful artwork. They were too busy splashing in his cans of paint. Then his floor caved in, and everyone followed Walter's bed down through the hole. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Maddie, Aunt Batty, Patty and Natty, Mr. Hanratty, Fatty Cat, 17 cans of paint, the stamps, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. There they are, crashing through. Maestro Ferlinghetti and his string quartet were astonished by the colorful crowd that fell from the ceiling. I want to take a look at the word astonished real quick before we move on. Astonished. What do you think that means? Well, it looks like everyone has been surprised as they came crashing through the floor. And if you look at his face, you can tell that astonished must mean surprised, amazed, maybe a little confused. Have you ever been speechless? You just didn't know what to say because you were just so, what is happening? I think that's how he's feeling. So let's keep reading. The maestro loved an audience, even if they dropped in unannounced. But when Walter's bed smashed through the floor and paint splattered everywhere, the maestro wished his audience would leave. And so they did, along with his string quartet. Now, he is a maestro, which means he conducts a band, or what they call in this part a string quartet. So that is people that play instruments with strings, like a violin or a cello and a bass. And so he is in charge of conducting them and showing them what comes next, keeping them in rhythm. But now they're all crashing through the floor. Uh-oh. All right, here we go. We're coming towards the end of our story. Let's see what happens. I'll show you this illustration before I flip over to read it. Maestro Ferlinghetti's practice room floor was also the basement ceiling. It was dark and quiet as midnight down there. Walter squeezed his eyes closed and tumbled through the darkness until he landed on something soft. He opened his eyes. Everything was in its place. His bedroom lights were out, the door was almost closed, and through it, Walter could hear his mother and father talking quietly. "No more jumping on the bed for me," mumbled Walter as he lay back down to sleep. So there he is in his bedroom, safe and sound. Suddenly, he heard a creak. The ceiling cracked, and down came Delbert. Down and down fell Delbert. So, boys and girls, did he really fall through all of those ceilings into all of those apartments with all of those people? No, he was actually dreaming. So, how many of you have ever had a silly dream like that? I know I have. So thinking about the fact that he was dreaming and what went on in our illustration and in our story, I would say we can agree that this story is a fiction story, not real, but also very entertaining and silly. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time for another great read. Bye, readers.